Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsey Memory. I work for BYU. I'm their workflow supervisor. I'm a little sad that I have to go after this cute presentation about Saltaire because I am just going to present about like these two boulders that just sit in my path all day that I stare at. Due diligence and metadata. And I would welcome not questions but like comments afterwards because I'm going to share today 2 or 3 things that I'm just thinking about and talking with a task force about, and I would love people's thoughts about it. And then I'll share one thing that I'm actually doing that's working. Okay, so last fall we had a unit review, which resulted in the curators being told that they needed to send us hopefully more things to digitize. The digitization was really talked about and encouraged, and the curators, some of them struggle with this because BYU is somewhat finished with the easy, like low-hanging fruit digitization projects where everybody is dead, everything is super public domain, the public interest is super great, and the curators lovingly created island-level descriptions a long time ago. Like, we knocked a bunch of those out, and now it's just like the thorny, ugly ones, but sometimes they're huge, and you do want them, but there's all these problems. So that's kind of a big thing that we're trying to think through, how to get those things up and running and go to our next level of digitization. So we have 3 areas that we're trying to tackle with the curators to develop maybe some new workflows. The first is how to work through due diligence for published orphan works, meaning things where the copyright holder can't really be identified. We don't know where they are, we don't know who they are, but we'd really like to scan their stuff. We also need to talk, we're thinking a lot about due diligence for manuscript collections that are going into our content DM. How do the curators address copyright issues? How do they address third-party privacy concerns? And this is, you kind of have a different way of approaching these, whether it's a legacy collection that we've had for a long time, or if it's new acquisitions. So those are the 2 things that I'm kind of thinking about, and I don't have a lot of answers. I just have like really long running bibliographies so far. And in the meantime, our content DM metadata process has aged and it needs some love. So I'm going to share with you what we've been working on with that in case any of you don't like your content DM metadata or metadata in general. Is it Allison? Allison talked about there's a couple of exceptions for copyright. One of them is libraries and archives. In the copyright law, there's an exception. It's 108H for published works that are called orphan works. They are, this exception allows for digitization of orphan works, meaning works where you can't figure out who owns the copyright, that are in the last 20 years of their copyright. So right now, that's 1924 to 1944. We've been working on a due diligence checklist. The 108H exception says basically you have to do your due diligence, and if you can't figure out who the copyright owners are, and if it doesn't look like it's being commercially exploited, you can put it online. So we're working on a due diligence checklist for the curators to work through. I shared this at the Zune winter meeting. I remember putting a slide with it up there. That checklist is currently receiving review by our copyright office, who want to make sure it looks lawyerly and says everything they want it to say. They have to verify that the work is not available at a reasonable price or if it's not being commercially exploited. Essentially, maybe my copyright guy would yell at me if I said this, but the checklist basically says you have to make sure that it's not available on Amazon, it's not being available on a couple other book dealers, and you have to keep track some type of record that you have done these searches at this time. And that would be our protection if somebody ever did come to us and say, you scanned my thing. And we say, well, we looked for you and we couldn't find you. Our checklist has been used with great success by our music curator. You know, he's got a lot of scores where we have no idea who published these, and so he uses these all the time. He has a nice big file of all of his Amazon searches. I've also created a call number range report in CRC and Workflows where the curators can just give me a call number range, and I'll generate 2 pick lists, one with everything in the public domain from that call number range, and one everything in the last 20 years of its copyright. And they can go through and decide which things they want scanned. Several librarians have used this, and they've also used it to help plan their weeding projects. So if you ever are in a position where you have to woo people into giving you stuff to digitize, sometimes it can be helpful to say, well, if you give me all of your old stuff, I'll scan it, and then you can get rid of it. And they like that more than having to get rid of their stuff. Okay, so Privacy Task Force for Manuscript Digitization. So our goal is to create actually 2 due diligence checklists. The first one's for legacy collections. So how in the world are the curators supposed to dig through any potential third-party copyright issues, or third-party privacy and copyright issues? I don't have a checklist for this. I welcome your suggestions. And I think a lot of this has to do with what Allison was talking about. It just is, where is your institution's risk tolerance? And we don't know ours yet. We're trying to figure it out. If you guys have figured yours out, please tell me. I'd be interested to hear what everybody says. And then new acquisitions, we want to come up with a list of questions that the curators can ask donors as they're bringing in collections about privacy, about copyright. You know, are you the copyright holder? Do you know who is the copyright holder? Is there anything in this collection that another person would feel is confidential information that you somehow have? And then in addition to that, we are also trying to think through how to create archival series that would facilitate digitization, meaning sometimes you can create a series with all the letters written by the donor, and the donor wrote you permission, gave you permission to digitize everything, as opposed to having letters to and from interfiled where you would have to stop and not digitize all the things that the person received versus that they wrote themselves, because they wouldn't have the copyright to the letters that they didn't write. We're also thinking about doing a deed of gift update to specifically say, do you own the copyright? If yes, do you want to give it to us? Do you want to license it to us? Do you know if you have the copyright? And as another thing we're looking at is adjusting our user agreements to remind our patrons that ultimately, if they're going to use it, they need to make sure that they're respecting privacy and copyright as well. So I'm on 2 task forces with the curators that we're really just trying to think through our risk tolerance, think through what issues might come up, think through what we can and cannot digitize. We have like a running bibliography. It's much bigger than this, but these are the ones that we talk about the most. There's a couple of DAX courses. There's a privacy and digitization, and then there's a copyright one. We talk about those a lot. There's the ebook that is by Peter Hertley. I noticed that somebody's slides earlier today had that one. The American Archivist will have a lot of case studies, and those are really interesting to me to see where different institutions have kind of fallen on what they're willing to take in. This one's really interesting. They decided to redact some, and then they ask the patrons to pay for any additional redaction if they want digitization of additional records. That one's really interesting and kind of a weird solution, but I thought it was creative. Yeah, these are things I'm thinking about, and I stare at and think about all day because these are the hurdles I want to tackle so I can digitize more stuff. And that work will continue. At the same time, our content DM metadata process desperately needed an upgrade. Our current metadata policy is before something can be approved to be digitized, it needs a DAX compliant finding aid with FOLDM or item level descriptions before I'll take it, which is great in some ways. So in recent years, we have an in-house finding aid.lib.byu.edu, and this is the public-facing finding aid, and if we have a little get metadata button that we push, and it yanks things out of it and puts it into this nice little table that we then copy and paste for use to put into Content DM. If you ever load it into Content DM, you might recognize this format for your metadata. And this is a finished one. We have 64 fields of metadata that goes into Content DM. It's super annoying, but it works. Yeah, the top row is for the compound object level, and then however many pages an item is, that's how many page level metadata you get. And so this is a finished text file. We load JPEGs with text files with the metadata in it. This is what we like for our metadata. This is what it looks like in the end. This is a 4-page item with a printing version PDF at the end. Let's see. And the finding aid isn't the only place we get our metadata. There's other metadata that we take as well. So we take all that information from the finding aid and we copy and paste it into a little computer application that some students built a few years ago. We call it COMA. COMA asks my student employees a couple of questions. Is English the only language? Is this item textual or photographic in nature? What's your name? And then it goes through and it actually will check our scans to make sure that they're all named according to the naming conventions that we told it we like. And then it generates the final loading text automatically. So because of COMA and our finding aid website, it really takes us about 3 minutes to create loading text for any given compound object in Content DM, which is great. Yay. But the looming problem is archive space. BYU switched to an archive space admin a long time ago, and the public interface is in development right now, which means that the finding aid website is no longer updated. So no new acquisitions, finding aids are put in there, which is where I get my metadata if I wanted to scan those new items. So that made me panic last year slightly. And so I went into meetings and kind of waved my arms and was like, if you turn off the finding aid website, my process grinds to a halt. And then here comes my heroes, Jeff and the LIT team. So Brent Ellingson, who's the manager of web development, he had designed the finding aid website back in the day. He tasked Jeff Groberg, who's one of our senior software developers, to either replicate or improve on the get metadata functionality of our finding aid website. So over the last few months, we've had a lot of diagrams and a lot of staring at whiteboards. Here was one of them. This is the start to finish Content DM metadata process that we did, trying to figure out where things came from. This one I'm really proud of. This took me like 5 hours to do, just standing here, figuring out where every cell came from and how it was edited in my loading text. And I found out in the end, this is the stuff that my LIT team needed to know was where does the metadata come from? It's either the same for all objects, and those are things like our write statement and our phone number, or it's collection specific, it's item specific, and it comes from the finding aid website. It's item specific, and it's edited or generated by our little text, or it's the technical specs like the PPI, and if it's a JPEG or a PDF. Or it's item specific and it's created by human, or it could be 21 combinations of these. So some things came from the finding aid and it was edited by this, and then the human had to approve it. And anyways, 2 minutes. All right, I'm almost done. The good news is archive space likes plugins. You can play with archive space. So Jeff Groberg has created a plugin that replicates the HTML table of our finding aid database. He's almost done. We're just doing testing to make sure that all the information from various collections shows up in this exact same way that we want it to. So this is what it looks like on archive space. We now have the same thing, little get content DM metadata button that we push, and it makes it into the same table. So my future plans are, now, once we finish testing, then hopefully our digitization workflow continuity is ensured. We'd like to improve the process. One of the things that I would really love is to be able to download like a whole collection of metadata at once, and that way I don't have to do it item level by item level. I can just say, hey, little application, I am doing folder 1, item 1, give me the text. We'll see, and also COMA, it's just kind of messy. The IT people hate that I have archive space, that I copy and paste something into an application that then looks at the files. That just like drives them insane. They want a button that I can push to do it all. I'll let them try, that'd be great. Yeah, that's their button that they feel like. I keep reminding them I really wanted to double check the files. That's what COMA does right now. And I really want that part because I have student employees and they don't always do everything right. Maybe next year, we'll see. That'll be my presentation next year. If anyone else is interested in archive space plugins, archive space, we found that it's written on Ruby on Rails and compiled onto a Java application. And any changes you make have to be compiled, which can make it really, really hard to test your work. You can download the source code from archive space and then run it locally, and then you can see your changes in real time. Jeff our web designer was really having a hard time with this at first. It was crashing every time he'd make a change. So he finally figured out to download the source code and then play with it there. Also, if you're interested, it uses Apache Solr for the searching and indexing, and MariaDB, which is a fork of MySQL, for the backend database. And there's several really great tutorials out there for creating plugins. If you either are your web person or you have a web dev person, you can have them Google Teaspoon Consulting Archive Space or GitHub Awesome Archive Space. And that is a great starting place to putting some plugins into Archive Space. And that's about where I'm at. I have things to think about, and then this thing that I've developed that's made my life easier.